Thank you. For those of you that I did not get the opportunity to greet last week, I want to say to you that I am very thankful and I'm very proud to be serving as the pastor here at Columbus First United Methodist Church. And I look forward to continuing to meet everyone, to get to know you, know about your families, and to know what God is up to in your lives. So it's going to be a great journey, and I'm so thankful to be here and be a part of it with you and to carry on the wonderful ministries of this church. Over these next few weeks, we'll be in the series called The Virtuous Life. It is a series based off of the virtues of faith, hope, and love. And my hope and my prayer for us is that as we journey together, these may become the core virtues that define who we are as people of faith and as a church. And so we're going to talk about these over the next few weeks. There's no doubt that there's a measure of these things already present in your life, but if you're like me, you can grow. There's room for growth in each of these things in your own life. So that's what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. As Trey reminded us in the opening welcome, step by step, the Spirit of God forms us in these virtues as people of faith. Well, this story that was read for us just a moment ago, what in the world do we do with this story? It is a strange sort of story, isn't it? It involves this man named Ananias. He comes in to the church and he offers his offering and he drops dead. And just a little bit later, his wife, Sapphira, comes in. Same thing. She drops dead. We have 2 lies, 2 deaths, and a whole lot of questions. Sounds to me like an episode of Murder, She Wrote. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Some of you may be thinking, well, how in the world does the preacher know about Murder, She Wrote? Well, I used to watch it with my grandparents. Oh, seriously, I think this story would make a great text to launch a stewardship campaign. What do you think, Ann Russell? If y'all show up on Stewardship Sunday and there's a stack of white sheets up here, run. Okay, you better run. But y'all, this story isn't really about stewardship. It's not even about money primarily. It's a story about faith or lack of faith. You see, at this point in the book of Acts, the early church is growing by leaps and bounds in outward numerical growth or hundreds and thousands of people coming over to the cause of Christ. And people are growing inwardly in these virtues of faith, hope, and love. And they are shaped in them as they seek to follow Christ. Now, Luke describes the church at this early point as having one heart and one mind. They are all together. They're on the same page. They're pulling the wagon in the same direction. And there's great enthusiasm and passion behind the ministry and life of the church. It's an amazing thing to be a part of. Luke's talking about the young people, the old people, the men, the women, the rich, the poor, everything in between. Everybody is unified by the cause of Jesus Christ. And there's this profound sense of unity, and it's so strong that it united that congregation in an extraordinary display of faith and love. It was so deep that Luke tells us that people are selling their property and they're bringing the proceeds to the church and laying them at the feet of the apostles. And those proceeds, that money, those resources were divided up to those who had need. There was not a single person that would go to bed hungry. No one went without clothing. No one went without shelter. They were all provided for. You might say that it was a vibrant church. But wait a minute, we can't say that here in Columbus, can we? Or maybe we can't. It's a great church. But in terms, for us, it was a virtuous church. A virtuous church. And that's the kind of church that I want to be a part of. And I know and I trust that you do too. And watching this whole thing is a man and his wife, Ananias and Sapphira. They see the power and the transformation that's happening in the life of God's people, and they want in on it. They want to be a part of that church. They want to become members of it and join it. And so they had a piece of land, and what did they do? They sold it, and they brought some of the money to Peter, and they kept some for themselves. Well, Peter quickly realizes what has happened. And in essence, he says this to them. Everything you have is yours. It already belongs to you. And the church is not the sort of place that has an entrance fee. You know, we don't have dues here. We don't have food minimums that you got to keep up. It's not a club. If you want in, you can get in. And if you want to give to the church, that's your choice too. You can give all of it, some of it, or none of it. It's your act of discipleship. You get to choose what you give. The last thing you should have done is tried to deceive us. And after Peter says this, Ananias falls dead. Stone cold dead. Now, we're left wondering, I'm wondering, why did Ananias do what he did? Why did he do that? Was he just selfish? Was he putting on a display for other people to see? Was he trying to appear to be someone that he wasn't, a very generous person? I think Ananias held back some of the money out of fear. That's what I believe. I believe he was afraid that if he gave everything to God, that there wouldn't be enough for him, enough to care for his family. If he and Sapphira, if they turned everything over to God, he'd be living on the street. And so he kept some back just in case this whole God thing doesn't work out. Following worship one Sunday, I was approached by a young man in the congregation I was serving. He was probably 13 years old. And he said he had something he wanted to give me. And he pressed this envelope in my hand, and it was immediately following church. Lots of people were greeting me, and so I stuck it in my pocket. Later in my office, I reach in and I get this envelope out, and on the front of it, he had written this. I found this money lying on the floor. Just take it and put it in the offering with the rest of it. And it was a sealed envelope, one of the little pew offering envelopes. And I opened it up, and inside was 1 penny. 1 penny. But y'all, this young man, Justin was his name. Justin had the level of faith that he believed that if something had been given to God, then it needed to go in that offering plate. And not 1 penny needed to be left out. Ananias doesn't have that kind of faith. Doesn't have that level of faith. He gives some and then he keeps some. He sells his property, gives a little to the church, puts the rest in a rainy day fund. And we're left wondering, why does he do this? But before we judge him too harshly or critically, I mean, this guy was struck dead in church during the offering. That's a pretty serious thing. So let's don't be too harsh on him, because what he's doing is a hard thing to do. He felt this burden that in order to be a part of the church, in order to serve God and honor God with his life, that he needed to sell everything and give it to God. And y'all, that's a heavy thing to do. You know, I've been serving in the church for 20 years, nearly 20 years. And I've yet to have somebody come by my office and have a conversation like this. Jimmy, I like what's going on around there. And you know what I'm going to do? This Sunday, when the offering plates come around, I'm going to put everything I have in that plate. I'm going to clean out my bank accounts, my savings, my IRAs, 401ks, everything. I'm going to liquidate it all, and I'm going to bring it and put it in the offering plate on Sunday. And I'm going to completely trust God from this day forward. Have you ever done anything like that? No, I have never done anything like that. I've never known a layperson to do it. I've never known a preacher to do it. I've never known a DS to do it. Sorry, Dr. Jackson. I don't even know a bishop that's done it, but there might be one in Mississippi. I don't know. But y'all, that kind of response calls for this huge level of faith. Someone that would be willing to entrust everything to God. And you know what? Ananias just didn't have that level of faith right now. He just couldn't do it. You know, what I hope for when I read this story is that he would have just come clean with Peter. That he would have just said to Peter, you know what? I really want to be a part of what's going on here. I believe that God is at work. We can see it. There's no doubt. I want to be able to give everything I have to God, but right now I'm struggling to do that. I'm afraid. I don't know if I have that level of faith, that kind of heart, that kind of soul that can utterly trust God with everything I have. You know, if he would have had a conversation like that with Peter, I think he could have worked with that. And step by step, together, they could have walked that journey of ever-growing faithfulness to Christ. That journey that many of us have been on for years. But you know what? The thing is, when we first started that journey and where we are now, can't we look back and say, man, there's a lot more faith in my life. I hope we can say that. And I believe that could have happened for Ananias. They could have taken that journey a step at a time. Y'all, the truth is this. Nobody is born with these great big Jesus-sized faiths. We're just not born that way. That sort of virtue in us has to be cultivated and grown. And many times it develops over years of life commitment to Jesus Christ. And day by day, as we live committed to Christ, our faith grows. And then we trust God in the little things so that later in life we learn to trust Him in the great big things. For most of us, that's how this virtue, that's how all of these virtues, faith, hope, and love, are manifest and brought to fruitfulness in our lives. There's a psalm that we've all heard growing up. In Sunday school, we've memorized Psalm 119, 105. Do you know that psalm? Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. It's a passage that says that God is with us even in the darkness. God is journeying with us, and He's walking with us. He's beside us as we take steps in life of trusting, obedience. He's with us, guiding us. To me, that's what this psalm is about. But y'all, we can miss the point when we read this text, your word is a lamp unto my feet, because when we read it, a lot of times we're thinking like this. We're envisioning a great big spotlight. Well, we might need to clean that. Yeah. Okay. Just kidding, come on. I know y'all polished everything before I got here. But this is kind of the image we have, a spotlight, something that throws a beam of light 100 feet out. Thy word is a lamp. Man, it brightens up our path. It brings great clarity. But y'all, following Christ doesn't always have that kind of clarity, does it? Instead, this psalmist had something different in mind. A few years ago, my wife and I were in the Holy Land, and we were in Jerusalem, and before we left the Holy Land, I wanted to buy a souvenir. There was something I had in my mind that I wanted. And as we were walking down the Via Dolorosa, I looked up, and there was this shop. And across the top of it, it said, Alabama, the heart of Dixie. It's there. It was when we went in 2011. This shop, and they had me hooked. I was like, okay, Crimson Tides and Holy Land. So I went inside, and there was this guy that was very enthusiastic. I make a good price for you, yes? And he just went on, and I saw what I was looking for. And I bought it from him and probably paid 3 times more than what it was worth. But here's what I bought. Now, this is not the actual item. I had to borrow this from Trey. Mine's still in a box somewhere. This lamp. When the psalmist says, Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path, this is what they're talking about. You would pour oil in here, and you would light this wick. How much light can you imagine this lamp gives out? Enough light to take a single step. And as you take a step, there would be enough light to take another step. And another step. And as you walk in the light of God's counsel, His wisdom, according to His Word, day by day, year after year, you look back and you've traveled many miles. Your faith has grown. Not by instant, great, big leaps, but step by step. And that's what this psalmist is talking about. The psalmist says, along our journey, God is going to be with us. Step by step. He will always give us enough light to take the next step. Not great, big, giant leaps, but small steps of faith. And isn't that a wonderful promise for us? It's a wonderful promise. You know, my prayer as we begin our season of ministry together is that our church would reflect the depth of faith and unity that we see in the early church. That we would grow more and more into these virtues of faith, hope, and love as we follow Jesus Christ together. Now, to do that is going to require us to take steps of faith. And there's some things that's going to challenge us along the way. I'm the type of pastor that's probably going to challenge you to take some steps of faith. And I hope we'll be obedient. And I hope we will walk by faith and not by sight. And so this morning I ask you, what step of faith is the Lord asking you to take? What do you need to trust Him to do in your life? What situation are you facing right now that requires you to take a step of faith? Will you trust Him with that? Will you trust the Lord to guide you, to strengthen you? Will you trust the light of the Holy Spirit that's been revealed about that situation? Will you take that step in faith? Will you trust the Lord to be with you as you take it? It's time for us to walk by faith. It's time for us to step out. Amen.